So it turns out Air Canada is back in the news today. Based on all the problems it's had over the last little while, and it's been mired in a variety of different problems. This one kind of came out of the blue, and it's not good news for Air Canada. New J.D. Power survey suggesting that Air Canada, and there are a few different categories involved here, and I'll ask our guests to run them down, but bottom line is Air Canada near the bottom of the pack in customer satisfaction. Michael Taylor is head of J.D. Power's travel division. He is on the line. Mr. Taylor, thank you for your time.
You're quite welcome.
Let me begin by asking, first of all, when I say mired near the bottom, from what I've seen, you have three categories here. One is economy, one is premium economy, and one is business. Premium economy and business, Air Canada is in fact at the bottom of the pile. Is that correct?
Yes, of those airlines that are ranked, yes, in North America.
So these are North American airlines, I should have pointed that out, that we're dealing with here. First of all, let's talk about the survey. How many people and based on what?
It was a survey of about 9,500 people over the last 12 months or so, and it was basically asking about their last experience in the last 30 days that they had on one of the airlines listed.
Okay, and when you say experiences, what sort of questions are you asking?
Oh, we ask about the whole range of experience from, booking your ticket to showing up at the airport, what's it like on board, how was the in-flight entertainment, how was baggage claim, so everything from soup to nuts.
Okay, and I would. It's interesting to note, by the way, when Air Canada, and I see they've issued a statement already suggesting that, yes, in this particular survey, the J.D. Power survey, they didn't fare very well, but they make a point of saying in other surveys they've done extremely well. Now, I'm not asking you to comment on your competitors or people, who are doing these surveys as well. J.D. Power's been around for a long time. I think we put it at the top of the list as far as that goes. So what do you say to that?
Well, we'd like to think that we do a good job. I don't quite, as you say, I can't speak to the methodology of other rating systems, but we do ask people about the entire experience, their most recent experience on all these airlines. And as we see, quarter after quarter and year after year, we get fairly consistent results. And when airlines move up or move down, there's generally some kind of policy change, equipment change that they've made that explains those movements. So as I tell people, we run this experiment every 3 months, and statistically, we think we're very reliable.
That being the case, has Air Canada been sort of on a sliding scale downward for the past little while?
Actually, no. If we, it's not something we publish, but if we look at the quarter by quarter results, actually both Air Canada and WestJet are, moving up in the rankings. They just didn't have a very good first half of the year. That's really why they are sort of ranked where they are.
So when I look at the list and I see the Delta, for example, has come up number one in a couple of these categories, and I want to get to that in a sec. I notice with Air Canada, I think you said that the one thing people complain about, and I don't know if this is the most, but it's one that's on the list, people are not as happy with the value for price paid. What does that mean exactly?
Well, we don't have any parenthetical expressions. We don't try to define that. We just ask people, did you think you got good value out of the price you paid for the ticket on a particular airline? And both Air Canada and WestJet are below the average there. Now, what probably is happening is there's some, everybody's seeing airfare increases of some type or another. It might be a little bit higher for a lot of the routes that Air Canada is flying. And I do know that Air Canada has big plans for the future, which means they'll need cash now. And, of course, prices are going to rise when demand remains high, and demand for leisure travel has remained steadily high since the end of the pandemic. So for a business decision, I think this is a good thing, not so necessarily a good thing for the actual flying public.
It's funny you mentioned this. So I remember we were talking about something that we kind of termed revenge travel, right? When after the pandemic, people who couldn't go anywhere were all running out. Do you see that continuing? Is that still the trend? People flying more than they did before the pandemic? Have we reached that level?
Yeah, actually, that is true. The demand has not slacked off for leisure travel, and it's been somewhat exacerbated by the lack of airline pilots that we see across the world, especially here in North America, the lack of aircraft available to fly, with the Boeing delivery problems and the Boeing QA problems. A lot of aircraft have been taken out of service. So when you have a high demand and a low supply of actual seats flying, you have to expect that prices will go up, and I think that's what we're still seeing now. To me, I am actually still surprised that people are traveling as much as they are, considering the price they're paying for a ticket.
Yeah, of course, the other, I guess, reaction might be, well, there's no other option. It's not like, you go from one carrier to another. Prices don't change all that much, although I have a feeling Canadian carriers are probably charging more than American, but they're smaller, I guess, carriers, so maybe that makes sense. I would ask one other thing, and I think it's only fair. I mentioned Delta did so well in your system here. The question, I guess, is what is Delta doing right, according to this survey, to be this highly ranked?
Well, the low-price airlines, or those airlines that skimp on services, have never done well in the J.D. Power survey. They serve as sort of a different public. We do rank them, and you'll see that those low-cost airlines do rank very, very low, lower than WestJet, lower than Air Canada, I might add. But what Delta is doing right is they are providing very good value for the money. They've been upgrading their in-flight entertainment systems over the last few years. They've made a special effort to have that human touch on board, and they're doing very, very well with that. They use technology to interact with a handful of passengers on every flight. Each flight attendant is charged with interacting with a handful of passengers, and they're rewarded if the scores go up. So, they've been doing that for, 4 or 5 years now, and they're doing an extraordinarily good job of it. The other winner in our study, Southwest, has always had high people scores, and if you've ever flown Southwest, you can see that the personality of the flight attendants and the pilots really does come through, and people do enjoy that part of the traveling experience.
So you're making the case that at a company like Southwest that you just mentioned, they're hiring for personality as much as they are for basic training, which every airline has to hire for.
Right. I always credit them with inventing the phrase "hire for attitude." I don't know if they've actually done that, but when I go talk to them, they don't deny it. But that's definitely what they look for. They look for people who like to interact with the public, like to be under a little bit of stress when they're in front of people, and they hire those kinds of people, and it shows up in our scores in our study.
That's fascinating. Yeah, and the Delta thing is fascinating as well. I had no idea. You say they have handhelds, right, as opposed to just regular smartphones, and as you just pointed out, they will deal with, 10, 15 people on a flight who they get very personally involved with, knowing, where they've traveled before, and work extra hard to make them happy, which is pretty unique.
Yeah, it's actually less than that. So it's probably around 5 interactions per flight, which is achievable. What I tell our clients, our airline clients, is that you can't tell your flight attendants, be nice to everybody. That's impossible to be nice to 185 people on a 3-hour flight. You just won't be able to get your job done. But you can be nice, especially nice, to about 5 people. And that does make a difference if you do that flight after flight.
Wow. All right. I will leave you with one last question. I don't know that this is something you actually cover. When I think of Air Canada, I have heard from so many people because Air Canada has I don't know what you call that, but a brand called Rouge, which I guess are smaller planes on cheaper flights. Do you ask about that as well, or is this just Air Canada overall?
No, some Rouge flights will be in that, but we include them under the Air Canada brand.
Okay, because they're not very good. Mr. Taylor, I want to thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
You're quite welcome.